Hi, and welcome to this episode of Autisable Dad's Life with Autism from a Parent's Perspective. You know, every year the CDC announces an update regarding autism prevalence rates. In the early 80s, the rate was 1 in 10,000. This year they announced 1 in 59. But what does that really mean? Is it that we are getting better at diagnosing autism, or that we are really becoming more aware? When looking at the numbers, we can quickly assume that there is an epidemic of autism. But is this really the case? Now, in this episode, I chat with Walter Zahorodny, Ph.D., who heads up the New Jersey portion of the CDC report. What we discuss is what I'm asked on a regular basis regarding these numbers. And it's more revealing when you dive into the report than if you just take the numbers at face value. Walter works in the pediatrics department at Rutgers University, New Jersey Medical School. His group established and maintains an autism surveillance system, evaluates environmental, non-genetic risk factors for autism, and develops novel approaches to autism screening and assessment. Their most recent publication is Preliminary Evaluation of a Brief Autism Screener for Young Children, which presents evidence in support of the Psychological Development Questionnaire. In the past, Walter studied neonatal withdrawal and designed a reliable tool for evaluating the severity of withdrawal, the Neonatal Withdrawal Inventory. Now, autism rates in New Jersey are the highest in the nation, 1 in 36. So his team's efforts have some serious weight on the topic at hand. We hope you enjoyed this episode.
Joining with me today is Walter. Walter, thank you very much for taking the time today to answer a bunch of questions in regards to the new CDC announcement rates and what's going on with this report by the CDC and what it means. I know as an autism parent, I'm often asked questions by the general public. What does that really mean? And then they immediately go into causation. And I think one of the things that I've found after looking over this report is that there's still a lot yet to decipher, a lot yet to really dive into. And I think it starts with how this report begins. This is actually a report that starts off in 2014, and the announcement today, like 4 years later, just a few weeks ago, talking about autism rates being 1 in 59. But you're in New Jersey, and your autism rates are different. How did this CDC report start off with? We're just trying to educate the general public here. What is this process? I see that there's the Autism and Development Disabilities Monitoring Network. That's like just 11 states.
Correct, Joe. So the 11 states in the network include the lead group from Atlanta, which is the CDC group. And we all follow a common set of case-finding principles and procedures and a standard common autism definition so that the information coming from the sites could be as consistent and as comparable as possible. And our primary objective is to derive the most accurate, reliable, population-based estimates for autism. Population-based means that we're trying to find every child who meets the definition in a specific region. We're not just content to identify those that have already been diagnosed with autism or someone indicated suspicion about autism. And so we do this by having agreements with all the special ed districts in our region and all of the developmental health centers in our region, main primary developmental, behavioral, and psychiatric health providers to children. And we arrange to review all of their health records, if it's a developmental health source, and all of their special education records, if this is through the special ed districts, of 8-year-olds who lived in the region in the study year.
Oh, okay.
We only focus on one age cohort at a time, and it's always children who are age 8. And so our resources are limited and the process is very labor intensive and time consuming. And so in New Jersey, our region consists of 76 school districts and a little over a dozen developmental, behavioral, neurological health providers.
Right.
And so we schedule our researchers to go into all of these special ed districts and all of the providers, and we review all of the available records that consist of professional evaluations that were conducted in order to either diagnose the child, classify the child for special education services, provide some learning resources, or assist in some other educational or health-related way. Our region is really, I think it's quite large. We focus on 4 counties in New Jersey: Essex, Hudson, Union, and Ocean counties, and those have an annual birth population of about 33,000. So when we start, we're intent on identifying who are the children in this cohort of 33,000 that, first of all, might be at risk of autism. So we throw our net very widely, that is by looking at all children who received any special education services or all children who received any psychiatric, developmental, or neurologic diagnosis for any childhood behavior problem. We're not reviewing only the records of children who've already been diagnosed with autism. We're looking at the widest possible array.
Okay.
In fact, we're probably looking at complete portfolios of health and developmental evaluations for 10 to 15% of all those children living in our population.
Now, your primary focus at Rutgers University was primarily New Jersey.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. I'm the PI for the New Jersey branch of this.
Okay.
And as we're doing this in New Jersey, in 10 other places in the United States, research groups are doing the same thing in their regions.
Okay. Now you said 4 counties, including the metropolitan Newark area.
Correct.
Now, is that all of New Jersey or just those 4 counties?
We're only doing surveillance in those 4 counties.
Okay. Now, of course, as you and I both know, dealing with analysis, you're only good as the data that is presented to you.
Right.
So, and of course, you guys do your due diligence. That's why you're dealing with all this labor-intensive stuff over the past several years. Do you feel as though the numbers would change if you were able to get more access to more information or more data, through the rest of the state? Or do you think that these are pretty comparable statewide as a good sample?
I think that our estimates are would be the same, regardless of where we are in the New York metropolitan region. If you're in another northern Jersey county, I would expect your rates and our established rates would be very close. The only reservation I have is that I'm not certain that we have ever, I know we've never really worked up a county that's rural. Okay. New Jersey has a couple of rural counties, but we've never done surveillance in them, and I wouldn't feel confident saying that our rates and the rural rates in New Jersey are the same.
Okay, so it sounds to me as though that the more densely populated an area is, the potential for higher prevalence in autism is most likely.
Right. There's always, first of all, going to be a stronger likelihood that urbanized areas will produce more contacts, more evaluations, possibly, and maybe more frequent evaluations depending on the area. So I would think that in many circumstances there there would be an expectation that there could be differences based on whether the region is urban or rural.
Just because there's more people to take those get the evaluation, not necessarily stating that the fact that there's more population density means more autism. It just means that there's more people able to be tested.
Right. That's
okay.
right.
So it's okay. That makes complete sense, at least to me. I hopefully to our listeners. And as you can see, I like diving into how the numbers came to fruition, how the process of this happened. And in these, you mentioned that there's a very strict set of guidelines that each, like your university, what you had to do, there's strict set of guidelines of who qualifies.
Right. So we have to spend a lot of time training and making ready the researchers who go out into the field to review and to abstract the information. We're privy to health and education records, which are protected, so our personnel are trained to maximize the safety, privacy considerations, and to protect the data. We use a special encrypted database with multiple layers of security, and we do a lot of training and regular review and fine-tuning so that our researchers can maintain their reliability over time and their consistency with other researchers in the network. And so those researchers who go into the field are using a specially delineated set of operating principles that describe how they're to review the record and how to abstract or copy out information from the records that have information that's relevant to us, how to separate the information into different fields, and ultimately how to back up and protect the data. All of that data collection, once it's completed in our region, opens phase 2 of our process. The researchers that went into the field only collect the potentially useful information, but then we establish complete chronological record based on all the evaluations we find for each child, and we strip out all of their identifiers, all of the information which would make it possible for someone to either understand where they are living or what school they attend or what race or ethnicity they are. And each child's portfolio of abstracted information goes to a panel of special autism experts, again, who are experienced diagnosticians, but when they review our records, they follow a very specific process of scoring and case determination.
Oh, okay.
And they go through, in a similar way, training and regular quality assurance procedures so that their scoring and case determination is consistent over time and hopefully consistent across ATOM sites.
Right. Now, of course, this takes forever. This report, this finding by the CDC, took 4 years worth of work on your end to pull this. Actually, 2 years worth of work.
2 years. Yeah.
So 2016 to current, and you're collating all this data to come to those determination of autism rates and all the other information that's located in this report.
Yeah.
One of the things that was highlighted here, and several people have asked of me, is the difference between the DSM-4 diagnosis and DSM-5 case definition, is that there's those differences, and it appears that in your area, am I correct in, did I read this right, that there's really not huge difference between those and rates and things?
Yeah, that's correct. This was a very, very challenging cycle because we analyzed all of our information, all of our subject data by DSM-4 criteria, and then separately by the new DSM-5 criteria. So in a way, there was twice as much information as usual for the experts to go through. And no one really has looked at the differences between the new, that is the DSM-5 definition of autism, and the old DSM-4 definition through a large population-based set the way we're doing and the Atom Network did for the first time in this report. And what we found in a nutshell is that the DSM-5 criteria are indeed narrower or stricter. The difference, however, is not gigantic. The difference is about 10 or 11%, such that in our case, the rate was 29.3 per thousand by DSM-4 criteria and 26.5 by the new DSM-5 criteria. So at this point, the first time we did this dual type of scoring and analysis, it's clear that DSM-4 catches just more cases. It yields a slightly larger estimate, but it's not like the estimates are significantly different. I'm pretty sure most people would say that DSM-5 looks like, in our case, 27 per thousand, and the DSM-4 is 29 per thousand. And in the frame of this type of disorder, the difference is not really meaningful.
You're talking about maybe a 2% difference over the course of all the 11 states. And when you're looking at those numbers spread across the board, it's negligible.
Yeah, at this point, one can say that the difference with regard to estimation of prevalence is negligible. It may change over time, however, as the DSM-5 becomes the dominant kind of definitional scheme for professionals. We may see that shifting over time.
Oh, okay. And I noticed that there is a huge difference in the diagnosis to children that are of different ethnicities, like between Black, white, Hispanic. And in New Jersey, you didn't really see as much as some of the other states.
Yes. So the question of, do children of all races and ethnicities have the same risk or prevalence of autism? That question really the Atom Network wasn't able to answer or really even have a clear idea about, I think, until this most recent report. In this report, that's 2014, we see that in New Jersey, in our large, diverse region, really for practical purposes, there is no difference. White children, 3%, Black children, 2.7%, Hispanic children, 2.9%. These are not real differences. These indicate that all children are equally likely to have autism. In the other Atom states, however, they're lagging in that most states are still showing white rates to be higher than Black rates and white rates to be much higher than Hispanic rates.
Now,
they have started to come down. That is, the disparity has started to come down in the Atom Network states, but you can still see it if you look closely at the table. To me, that means that they're improving. That is, the other states are improving in their ability to find all the cases. But in New Jersey, I think we've already shown that we're at that point where we see and can feel confident to say that there's no race or ethnicity-based difference.
So really kind of what we talked about previously, a few moments ago about the acquisition of data is that your researchers and people going out in the field has been really a key issue, and also people in the general public getting educated to get their children tested has been help.
Yes, definitely. New Jersey, I think, benefits a lot from the fact that we have a kind of mature, established, well-funded public education system, and that many children in our region avail themselves of preschool services before kindergarten. Many kids in our region go to school at age 3 or 4, and we do have reasonably good medical developmental health professional coverage for our region.
Okay. So one of the things that we're always asked, or at least I'm always asked, is if you've ever thought about starting your own podcast, what should I do? Well, we got on Anchor because when we were trying to figure out how to distribute content or how to be able to record easily, Anchor's worked best for us. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now Anchor can match you with great sponsors you want to advertise on your podcast. That means you can get paid to podcast right away. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now by reading this ad. So, if you've always wanted to start a podcast, make money doing it, go to anchor.fm/start to join me and the diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. That's anchor.fm/start. I can't wait to hear your podcast. You're listening to Autisable Dads, Life with Autism from a Parent's Perspective. Autisable is a social blogging community that provides a platform where anyone can join, connect, share, and discuss anything autism related. Autisable also provides digital marketing services for small and mid-sized nonprofits. For more information, visit autisable.com. Now, back to the podcast.
You know, there are multiple centers. One can take a child with a problem or a suspected problem in our region. In other states, maybe there's just one center like that, or families have to travel a great distance to find a professional that's experienced.
Right, and we were talking. You kept on mentioning the ADAM network. That is really just the Autism Developmental Disabilities Monitoring Network, right? ADDM.
Yeah, that's right. That's the group that we kind of compare ourselves to.
Okay, so for those listening, we're talking about the 11 states that are part of this. The 11 ADDM sites in the United States is Arizona, Arkansas, Colorado, Georgia, Maryland, Minnesota, Missouri, New Jersey, of which you're a part of, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Now,
some of these are new states.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first time that Minnesota and Tennessee are reporting with us.
Oh, okay. Is there a plan to expand this to other states? Are other states getting involved in this network?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure what the CDC intends. I believe they intend to continue surveillance, but I haven't heard that they're planning to extend. Okay. If it were up to my decision, I definitely would prefer to introduce a couple of other Northeast or Midwest states or California or some other populous region. As the network has come together, I think we're overrepresenting rural areas. Mm-hmm. And if I had a choice, I'd probably try to stick in a few more metropolitan areas.
Oh, okay. Well, that's understandable because that way you're getting more people that have a potential to have been diagnosed to see what's happening compared to the overall population in that region. Mm-hmm. So you're able to compare apples to apples.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I got you. Yeah, a lot of people, they keep on saying that it's better, getting better at diagnosing autism. And I think that's kind of a misnomer from what our discussion is. It's more about not just that. It's more about how you're able to obtain the data and the access to the data so that you guys can be able to do what you're doing. And as this network has grown and you've been able to get more access to more data, you're able to make these determinations on autism prevalence rates a little bit more clear.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you're putting your finger on something that's really interesting. That is that many reports or many renditions of this report suggest that there's better awareness. Therefore, we're identifying children with autism earlier. I look at the ADAM data, and I don't see that we've improved early diagnosis of autism. When we started doing autism monitoring, in our first study year, I'm pretty sure we identified median age of autism diagnosis was 53 months. And in this report, 14 years later, median age of autism diagnosis, 52 months.
So
There's no progress there.
So in 14 years, we've only improved by 1 month.
Yeah. If you're looking at the outcomes of the whole network, if you're looking at all the states together, it looks like there's no change.
Right.
If you go to each state, however, you may see a slightly different pattern. I looked in New Jersey, and I saw that we had a median age of autism diagnosis 52 months, similar, but now, that is in 2014, it was 48 months. So in New Jersey, I can say there's been some improvement. 4 months earlier average diagnosis, that's some improvement. But across the network, I think one can't really see that change.
Right. And as you know, for those that don't know, my background is more of a logistics analyst. So a lot of what I look at is how the data is collated and where the things are. And I've always found that information isn't, when we read reports like this, we see these statistics and we see these things at face value. And I've learned over 20 years as a logistics analyst and looking at what I do in analyzing data is that it isn't always what is seen, it's always what is not present that can provide the most answers. That's why I appreciate you taking the time, Walter, to help us dive into how this data is created so we have a better understanding of what this report really means and where it's great at. And I know that you guys are at the network and everything, and your efforts are consistently improving with every iteration of this because you're finding where you need to improve, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think the system, as designed, works wonderfully in a place like New Jersey where you have excellent quality information and you have excellent access to the information. I think in our system it works, and there's a kind of feedback process that allows us to sharpen up our methods and be even better at case finding than we were previously.
Right, and I think that people get stunned when they hear 1 in 59, but in your area it's what, 1 in 34? Right,
1 in 34. That to me, I sometimes wake up and I say, I know it's 1 in 34. How can it be so high?
Right.
1 in 34 means there's a child with autism, I guess, in every neighborhood, every classroom, every little neighborhood team has a child with autism. And if you're looking at, everybody knows that autism is more prevalent in boys than girls. If you look at the rate of autism among boys, it's even more surprising that it's 1 in 22 boys. That's, boys are almost 4 times more likely. So if you're saying that autism affects between 4 to 5% of all 8-year-old boys, to me that seems like, I don't know, almost like hard to accept, or one is forced to question it a lot because it seems so high.
Yeah.
And as someone who's been involved with this since the beginning, I've been in a position to see it go from 1% to 3% in a relatively modest amount of time. And I guess it's fascinating but troubling to understand that that's a true, likely, reliable rate and a true increase of 200% under conditions where we used a model and a system of case finding which was very restrictive and prohibitive. Not so easy for us to make a case determination, but here we were.
Right.
So I don't know. The numbers, I have been in this question for years, but I'm still bothered by the scope of the numbers.
Yeah, I think it's shocking to a lot of people because I remember when our son was first diagnosed, it took us several years just to get the diagnosis, just because it was at a different time in a different era. Now people come to me and say, I I'm thinking my son's on the spectrum. I'm thinking my child's on the spectrum. And I said, well, go get them tested. And then 6 months, a year later, they got the diagnosis and they're well on their way,
Right.
you know, with access to extra services and things like that. And then you have some couples who struggle with there's something wrong with their child, you know, that is not, quote unquote, neurotypical or normal.
Yeah.
And they don't know. You might have one spouse going or one parent going, yes, we got to get them tested. And the other one says, no, there's nothing wrong. And then, you know, so you have that dynamic of it. And I think which also makes your job a little bit more challenging because you have data that's not being presented because the parents haven't gotten their kid tested in any way, shape, or form. Would that
right.
be? So I'm just thinking that might be another contributing factor.
It's a big step to take the child forward to a professional evaluation. That might be the earliest important thing to accomplish. Bring the child to professional attention earlier if you have any concern. Doesn't even have to be, you don't even have to be explicit about is your concern about walking, talking, socializing. Just voicing concern increases the suspicion of pediatricians and family practitioners, and they may be more inclined to do a developmental assessment in their practice, or they may use an autism screener. And I guess if you're suspicious, bring your suspicions to your family and your child's doctor. And if that child's doctor isn't suspicious enough or doesn't take action, find your early intervention system in your county or your state and call them, because they're all legally there to provide an evaluation for a child under the age of 3, and they all do it for free.
Yeah.
So
I think,
take action.
Yeah, I think in our state years ago, we're talking like 10, 12 years ago, many doctors were apprehensive about, many doctors, pediatricians were apprehensive like 10 years ago to provide that diagnosis because they didn't know. And of course, when you slap a label on a child, that's with them for a long time. Whether or not it's true or not, it's if they don't know. So yeah, I think I thank you for mentioning that, seeking out other early intervention services that should be able to provide that option. And every state and every area is different. Now,
Yeah, they're all different. I wish I had like a all-purpose 800 number or a web address, but it's all state by state. So a couple of minutes more of looking and you'll find it.
Yeah. And on Autisable.com, we have a lot of family. We have some professionals. We have some nonprofits that we've partnered with that are able to assist or provide some insight, whether or not they just look on the site, see other people's experiences, or if they see a nonprofit that we're networked with, they can be able to talk to the local nonprofit, and usually local nonprofits like Tidewater Autism Society here locally or Autism Society affiliate chapters nationwide can provide that information. I just mentioned that because that's been our experience. We usually direct people in that direction. Or Autism Speaks has some local areas. There are 1-800 numbers with major nonprofits that can help say, hey, my kid might be on the spectrum. I don't know. Who can I go to get tested? And the only reason I know that is from years of doing what I do. This is all great information. So in Georgia, the CDC dealt with 5 counties, including metropolitan Atlanta. In Maryland, Johns Hopkins did 1 county in the metropolitan Baltimore area. And, it's not an all-inclusive thing. The total number of people was a little over 325,000 of children.
Yeah.
That is incredible. And that's just a small segment. That's just like a little snippet of the United States population.
Yeah, that's right. I took the time to look it up. It's around 8%. And when I looked at previous ADAM reports, we tended to report between 8 to 10% of the total U.S. 8-year-old population.
Wow. That's a lot of people still to go through. A lot of children to evaluate.
Yeah, it seems like it is quite an undertaking. I don't think there would be any possibility for this type of project to occur in multiple states without the sponsorship of some national entity like the CDC or the NIH.
Right.
While interest in autism might be great in individual states, it's not so easy to get funding for years to do this type of epidemiologic research.
Yeah, it is. It is very cumbersome type of research because you're just pouring over all the data and seeing what's what and whatnot. Now, as we're dealing with this here, and as you're dealing with this here in the United States, we also have listeners and people that visit Autisable.com that are in other countries like Canada, UK, and Australia. You know, mostly other English-speaking countries.
Mm.
When you're looking at these rates, are you aware of other autism rates in other countries and how we here in the United States compare to other countries, or do other countries look at our rates and kind of follow suit?
It's funny. I think probably the United Kingdom was the leader in doing epidemiologic research on autism, and I guess they would have started that in the 1980s when autism was affecting maybe 2 to 3 people per 10,000. But I'm aware of the autism rates somewhat in other countries. I see that a few weeks ago there was a important report from Canada where multiple provinces were participating. They had a different approach to their estimation of prevalence, but they found autism rates, I think, in the range of 2% in most areas. UK tends to, and Ireland tend to produce high autism estimates. Australia, New Zealand also. I saw something from Australia indicating autism prevalence above 2% in the last year. Then we have the Scandinavian countries, Norway, Sweden, Denmark. Their autism rates of late have been in the 1 to 2% range, and they imply also an increase over the last decade or so. What's interesting to me, however, is that even though it seems like autism is very prominent and prevalent here in North America and Northern Europe, I've looked actually to understand the rates in other European countries, France, Germany, and Italy, and it's almost like there are no good data. There are some, but in those countries, I'm a little bit taken aback by how low autism rates apparently seem to be. I saw a report from Germany reporting, I guess, from the last 2 years or so, and their rates seem way below 1%, kind of in the range of 0.5%, which is, way different than anything of the last decade. So I wonder, I have to think, Germany is an advanced economy, and France too, apparently very low autism rates, though there's very little solid data from France. But what seems to be the case is that there doesn't seem to be as many children with autism in some of those European countries, which you would expect to have the ability to detect autism pretty well.
Right.
If a kid has autism in Germany and France, I think they're likely to identify that kid when he goes to school, somewhere in the range of age 5 to 10 at the latest, sometimes earlier. But that's not apparently the case, and they're acting as if autism was sort of almost like an American phenomenon, like ADHD used to be an American disorder like 10 years ago.
Oh, wow.
If you read the European press, they said, what's wrong in the United States? So many children are said to have attention problems. Now I think the popular press in some of those countries says the same thing about autism prevalence in the United States, that it's somehow exaggerated or overstated.
Mm-hmm. But the amount of diagnostic involved to get the diagnosis is pretty hefty. I mean,
Indeed, right.
Yeah.
There's even the gold standard is, a highly experienced professional using a small number of tools. Yeah, not easy to get that diagnosis using the right tools anywhere.
Right. Wow, this is diving deep into how the report, the CDC report, is generated and how you have to do what you do in order to get the numbers that are there. I'm going to post a link to the actual report as part of this podcast. So that way people will have an idea of what it is that we're really looking at and the actual numbers. We're spouting off these. It's not like Walter and myself are spouting these numbers off our heads. They're actual figures. And actual information provided by the CDC. And Walter, thank you very much for helping us find how this is put together. And
thank you so much, Joel. I enjoyed talking with you and trying to let more people know about what we do and how we determine autism prevalence.
Yeah, I think understanding how prevalence is, understanding it, and how it's generated. It's been an eye-opener to me because sometimes, we get asked the question, wow, 1 in 59, that is a lot. And then when we look at the numbers, it's most likely most likely higher. It's just a matter of the data that you're able to obtain in order to calculate these figures. And it's not just how many are being diagnosed. It's meeting a certain set of criteria and how much access to information you have. So, wow. That is incredible. So, do you have any questions for me?
Well, not really. I'm glad that there are people like you who are interested in autism and find the time to engage the people who are working in it. I'm in a way, stimulated to work on questions related to autism because there's so many things we don't understand, and to find that someone else is interested in that as well is very gratifying.
Yeah, I have a selfish motive. It's my son. But there are thousands of families and hundreds of nonprofits we're connected to that the type of work that you're doing and all that you're involved in is very important to us. And I appreciate all the hard work that you put into this report. And thank you very much for all the effort that you're doing. I'd like to bring you back on to this podcast down the road so we can dive into the other aspects of this type of report to see how things have changed, in the reporting and how the numbers have changed and why. I think for this effort, I think diving into how you do what you do and what you do is just as important as just looking at the numbers. So,
thank you so much, and I would look forward to talking to you and your audience again anytime.
Thank you again, Walter, and appreciate all that you're doing.
Thank you. Be well. Thank you.
Be well. Thank you.
Again, I appreciate our guest, Walter Zahorodny, for answering several questions and for helping me dive into the numbers and how his team and the ADDM network gather the data for their research. If you'd like to continue this discussion, please feel free to join Autisable.com and share them. You can also follow us via social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. As a reminder, this podcast is available on Spotify, Google Play Music, iTunes, Stitcher, and TuneIn. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. And thank you for enjoying this episode of Autisable Dads, Life with Autism from a Parent's Perspective.